think that the most profound gift that we have as storytellers is being able to crack people open. You know, we learn so much about ourselves.
I remember being in the NFL one time, and we had a speaker, and they said, "Who watches romance movies?" And Wesley Woodyard was the only guy that raised his hand. He turned around and said, "Oh, y'all lying in here, huh?" You know what I mean?
Film can do that for us. A film can provide that release. A film can provide that representation.
One of the things that we know as athletes is what tryouts look like.
Yeah.
Bennie and I want to become an actor. We go to our first audition. What is that?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we may have the biggest badass we've ever had on the Gridiron and Growth podcast. I'm your boy, Ryan Harris, next to Super Bowl champion Bennie Fowler. And please welcome someone who has been in the entertainment industry since the age of 22, started multiple companies, and currently is at the Working Artist Group, which offers business coaching and management services to the working artists. She also does work that feeds into ESPN, Fox, does movies, does casting, does directing. Please welcome Krista Gano.
We need to just get one of the
the horns?
Yeah.
Literally, like, I just want to record it and walk into a room and be like, this is what I expect.
Yeah, let the people know.
Absolutely. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We could begin anywhere with you. Let's talk about, you are a woman founder of multiple companies. Mm-hmm. When did you know that you needed to start a company to create what needed to be made for the entertainment industry?
Oh, wow. I think that was mostly when I moved here to Denver. When my husband and I moved here, when we started having kids, we decided Los Angeles was just not the place we wanted to raise our family.
14% income tax, too.
And that's a whole other story about the house appraisal we had in order to buy a house. At that point, we're like, no, we'd like our kids to have, I don't know, a room.
Yeah.
No, so when we came here, it was clear I had to create something because the level I'd been working at in Los Angeles wasn't here. And we had, at that time, New Mexico was really coming up as a place it was before the studios were there and everything, but it was starting to happen. And I knew we needed to prepare a workforce for that. And because you don't go like, I have never done anything, but I'm going to step onto an NBC soundstage and make that work. That does not happen that way. So that's where the start of Working Artist Group happened. It was, how do we teach the business skills to actors who are able to drive down within that range of union activity to get jobs down in real life, career-changing jobs down in New Mexico, and how do we launch them the best way we can. So that was the start of that. When I first came here, we also had Innovative Improv Solutions, which is a company I have with one of the other alumni of the Groundlings, I used to be the executive director of the Groundlings in Los Angeles.
And they fed much of the talent to Saturday Night Live.
They do. It's a sketch and comedy school and theater, and it's been around, they're celebrating their 50th year this year. And I mean, people who've come out of that are Paul Rubens with Pee Wee Herman, Elvira, Cassandra came out of there, all the way up to Will Ferrell, Will Forte, Kristen Wiig, Mikey Day, who's on SNL right now. I mean, and a ton of people in between. So what I learned at the Groundlings was how much improv could really help business people. So we started a company, David, John, and I, called Innovative Improv Solutions, where we go into companies and we use improv exercises as a modality to teach better communication, how to show up authentically, how to listen, how to be present, and how to stay strong when you've got the anxiety running up in you a little bit.
Sweats.
When you got the sweats. And, how to not live in the wreckage of your future and really stay present, all that good fun stuff.
Now, before we keep going, we were talking before the show about improv, and I always thought it was yes and. Bennie, you're an improv artist yourself.
Yes. Yeah, I went to improv class.
And you said you teach it differently.
I do.
So the common concept is yes and. Hey, Bennie, that's a great shirt. And I got it at, whatever. Yeah. But what do you teach differently than yes and to create that modality that increases communication?
So we can't, in the business world, always say yes and. You have to say no at times. Right. But you can have the spirit of yes and. So I say it's, yes, I heard what you just said, and I would like to add to it, as opposed to, yes, I heard what you just said, but here's my agenda. And what it does is when you yes and properly, it puts the two of us on one side of the problem, and we're looking at the problem together. So, for example, I worked with doctors at Kaiser Permanente for 10 years. And one of the things we worked with them was how do you yes and with a patient who is non-compliant. So one of the things you could do is, if you look at the difference, here's the difference. I'll change one word in it. It sounds like you want to manage your diabetes with diet and exercise, but it's time we consider insulin. Okay, I'm going to do it again. I hear you want to manage your diabetes with diet and exercise, and it's time to consider insulin. And all it does is it says, hey, there's a problem that we have. The two of us, man, we're battling it really hard, but we're not making the same roads in that we want to. How do we do that together? And so it's just a really slight difference, but for a business person who's working off of that, it changes everything. You start in your emails. There are rarely any negative words in my emails. I will always find the opposite way of saying it, and you always can. I always say there's no buts unless I mean it. So Johnny was really struggling in school earlier this year, but he's doing great now. We're wiping away that first half.
Right.
There's no I love you, but. So I flip everything. I don't tell people what I can't do anymore. I only tell them what I can do.
Wow.
Love that.
And that's what the power to me of yes and has done, is this changed the way I communicate into something that's almost always positive, even when I have to have those tough conversations.
Love that. You're in a creative industry. When did you know that you were creative? You had this artistic background. Talk a little bit about when you discovered that, I love creating things. I love being in the entertainment industry.
I don't think I've ever wanted to do anything else. And
Wow.
I was little, I directed my first play of Annie in fourth grade in the library at school.
Wow.
So I don't know if I ever, I think I noticed it when I was a kid. I loved playing everything. I loved the day where I get to be an astronaut. And I always say I have a very deep and broad and lovely mind palace. I was a big imagination kid. But theater for me started in middle school pretty seriously. And then by the time I got to college, I knew it was what I wanted to do. Like many artistic children, I think I had parents who were very, very nervous about that. So they told me to get a real degree. So I picked the degree. It's a wonderful degree, so I don't want to make light of it. But I picked a degree that was very easy for me and allowed me to spend all my time in the theater. And I have a Bachelor of Science in Sign Language Interpreting along with my BA in theater. And I worked at Deaf West when I was in LA while I volunteered for them.
Deaf West?
Deaf West is a deaf and
okay.
hearing theater in Los Angeles.
Wow.
So where they do really great productions. They actually went to Broadway about 10 years ago with one of their shows. So they're great. But it just wasn't, for me, it was how do I spend all my time in the theater.
Wow.
That's incredible.
I'm a big, my favorite show is Phantom of the Opera. Just to put that out there for you. My grandmother.
That's a show? I thought it was just a play.
Well, play, show, whatever you
Well,
want.
it's both. You
Whatever
can see
show
the play
trying to
or
go
the
to.
musical.
Yeah.
And if you're wanting to see the musical and you show up to the play, you're pretty disappointed. So.
Yeah. My grandmother grew us up. We were watching musicals all the time. It's really something that, I think as athletes, we see creatives and actors, we're like, wow, man, how Denzel gets into a character and things like that.
Wait, can we pause before you ask that question? I would like to say, just because we were talking about Phantom of the Opera, I did perform that 6th grade.
What?
Come on.
Lip sing.
Love
Okay.
it.
Yeah, lip sing, but I
Yeah.
performed one of the main songs there.
All
It's
right.
one of my mom's favorite plays.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
That's
man.
great.
I
haven't
didn't know
seen
we
it.
said that.
Yeah.
Come on. You see
Well,
what
that
you're creating here?
that should make it into the visuals of this, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And that still exists.
We'll have the Phantom of the Opera opening to
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
right.
One of the things that we know as athletes is what tryouts look like.
Yeah.
What does it look like for actors and what they're doing, whether it's a big role, a small role? Like Bennie and I want to become an actor. We go to our first audition. What is that?
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, it looks different now than it used to. It used to be that you got your sides, you held them, you showed up in a room, you read them, you did what we call your take on them. So ideally bringing your personality, your idea to it. You get very little information if it's a smaller role. So you just sort of have to hope that you're what they're looking for.
Wow.
And then you leave, and that's it. Now, and you do that over and over and over and over again. I think, there was an actress who, I can't remember which one it is now, but she was talking about how when she first started that she learned that the average was that the first job came at like 270 auditions or something like that.
By the time you get in and just say, bleep it, I'm going to go do it my
exactly.
way.
There's something to that. So she would check them off like, okay, well now I've got 269 left, whatever. Like, and she got her break before that number came. But it used to be, I mean, think of it, 270 times of walking to a room and expecting that you will leave with nothing. And that is true. No feedback usually.
Wow.
And
That's
no
awful. Return
call or nothing. So you just sort of got to keep throwing it at the wall and doing the best you can and hope you match. Now they do taped auditions, and that has opened up a whole new, like, there's light and dark to everything, right? The light is that people who are all over the country can now audition and when at a time where before it used to be you got to be in LA. Mm-hmm. The hard part now is it's added a lot of more people to the mix.
Right.
So what used to be 400 people going for a job is now 4,000.
Whoa.
And people are throwing everything at the wall. I mean, like, they're just becoming like producers, writers, directors, and now people are doing these auditions in costume and all of this stuff. And I could go into the pros and cons of whether you should or should not be doing that, but it's just created an environment that, it used to be, I'm going to prep for an audition for an hour or so. I'm going to go do it. It's going to be 10 minutes and I'm going to go on with my day. And now you've got people spending hours and hours on one 3-line audition. And that, to me, it's putting a lot of pressure on artists. It's putting a lot of pressure on artists that shouldn't be there.
The acting world or the entertainment world is very much like professional sports in some ways, in terms of it's not all what it's cracked up to be.
Correct.
I have a great friend, shout out to my buddy, one of my best friends, AJ Troop, who's an actor out in LA, and I've gotten a chance to see his journey, and he's now on some very prominent national commercials, and he's making his way. He will be a movie star. Mm-hmm. But, it's hard.
Yes.
And, we see the Denzels of the world, but, I mean, there are thousands of actors that are trying to make their way. What advice would you give them in terms of how to approach this?
There's a few things. I think it's important to have a life that doesn't revolve around that piece of the puzzle. So you have to live, as actors we are requesting, asking, begging, paying for them to keep their emotions really to the top of their skin, right? To be able to get in there and show us an emotion very easily and quickly. And to do that, I think you need to live and be healthy. So when people go out there, I always say, like, do you have your bank account in? Do you have savings? Do you have a place to stay? Do you have a community you can plug into quickly? Because otherwise you're going to be home. And because you don't want to go to Los Angeles or New York just to live in Los Angeles or New York. You need to go there with a plan to be healthy and supportive to your goals. So that's one thing I would say. The other thing I would say is, like, I've heard people go, I'm going to go out for one pilot season, which doesn't exist, by the way, anymore, but I'm going to go out for like 3 months and make it. And it's like, no, that's a 10-year town. It's 10 years, really. I mean, everybody's watching Bridgerton right now like crazy, right? And Nicola Coughlan, who is, I think she says it Coughlan with her cute little accent, is 37. She's playing like a 19-year-old, unbelievably, but she's 37.
I did not know that.
Yeah, she had been, before that, she'd been doing things for 10 plus years. The overnight successes in professional sports are not overnight.
Mm-hmm. Never.
So you got to go out, I think, with some expectations of you're going to have to put in the work, you're going to have to grind, you're going to have to be, you're going to be disappointed, you're going to have to figure out how to be resilient and pick yourself up, start again, figure it out. And you're going to have to figure out how to feed yourself through those periods of time.
Are you talking about NFL players or actors? I don't know. What's one actor that really you saw them, you're like, there's some talent, it's raw, and then they did that work, and they came out, and you're like, wow. I even as much raw talent as I saw, I didn't see this talent as a professional.
That's a big question because there's so many. I think who I knew personally. Oh, let's see if he listens to this. Mikey Day, who started out as a writer on Saturday Night Live, and now he's on SNL. And he also writes for films, and he's got some stuff, I think, in the hopper that will be coming out soon. And he also does that Cake show on Netflix, where is it Cake, I guess?
My kids love that show.
All right.
Every single episode.
So I would not say that Mikey came in to the Groundlings incredibly talented. I mean, I don't know if I've really known anyone to write as prolifically as him. Like, for every one sketch, if someone else would bring in, Mikey would bring in 5. Like, really? I don't know if he slept ever. Like, I don't really know what was going on with him. But he came in really raw. And I think the thing that is so wonderful about Mikey, and now he's 40, so it's now he's starting to step into that mentor role, I'm sure, on SNL. But the thing that was so great about Mikey always is he is just so humble. He takes notes. He listens. It's not about giving in and being run over by those notes. It's about hearing those notes and turning them into something beautiful. Because, listen, film, television, all of it, it's a team sport. Like, nobody does it alone. And so when you hear something over and over again about your writing, and you can really, like, be humble enough to go, how do I take that thing, still put my spin on it, but make it better? Then you're in this place where you can really fly. And I think Mikey did that so beautifully, as is shown by the career he has. And I think if we keep watching, when Mikey decides to leave SNL and he goes into more film, I bet you we're going to see somebody like Kristen Wiig. Kristen was very much like that too, who I remember looking at Kristen at one point and saying, don't let them just put you in comedy because you're a star. Like, do everything. And she clearly has. So it wasn't my doing, but
we can't say that. Definitively, we cannot say that. Yeah.
But I think Mikey's very similar. Like, when he comes out, if he can step into a space where, I think comedians often make the best dramatic actors. So I think he can really widen a scope into a place that will be really, really exciting to watch.
That's incredible. I'd love to, we were just talking about this off air, I'd love to dive into your top shows and why they are your top shows, just because you have an eye, and it's like somebody who's looking at a great painting or listening to people. Some people, when they listen to music, they hear things that I could never hear. So I'd love to top 5 shows that you're watching right now.
Oh, right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh my gosh, the thing is, I'm horrible at remembering any of their names, the ones that are most present. I did just watch Bridgerton. Come on.
It's a great show.
Because it's just super fun.
We haven't gotten into the 3rd season. My wife likes to wait so we can watch it,
Yeah, I couldn't wait. We had been talking about Fleabag, which I watched a long time ago, which I think the 2nd season is probably the most perfect season of television. My favorite, and I'm going to forget the name of it, it's an Australian show that I watched years ago. I've watched it like 3 or 4 times, and I'm going to forget the name of it. I'll let you guys know. It'll come to me. This is what happens with menopause, you guys. You lose things and it comes back. They had the 5th season of that show, had the most perfect season on grief I've ever seen, on the grief between two people. Queen Charlotte, which I know is in the Bridgerton universe. Tom Verica. Shonda Rhimes wrote that whole season, and Tom Verica directed that whole season. Wow. And it is, what looks like, it's about Queen Charlotte and this fluffy little thing, in my opinion, is one of the most beautiful and deep seasons on loving someone in mental illness.
Wow.
So, and I love, my very favorite thing is storytelling that is sort of packed in fluff. But then when you crack it open, you're like, that meant something.
Yeah.
So those are my favorite things. And that's when I write. That's what I try to write, something that probably feels a little like cotton candy at some points. But when you really get into it, there's a lot under the layers of what it meant.
I feel that way about Ted Lasso.
Yes.
I think, it's a very funny show, but there are a lot of life lessons in all of those episodes where I really appreciate it. And even when I look back at it now, the Fresh Prince episodes or the Cosby Show episodes, I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of lessons in those. But Ted Lasso is really one that speaks to me in terms of, handling divorce or, having to sacrifice and move across the country, leading a team, leading an organization. Mental health.
Mental health.
There's a lot of lessons in Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate you sharing that.
I think that the most profound gift that we have as storytellers is being able to crack people open. Mm-hmm. I think the most unifying and joyful things that bring us together are sports and stories. Mm-hmm. Like laughter, sports, stories. Like I'm like, literally, if I could spend my whole life just providing laughter, sports, and stories to everybody, I would consider it a life well lived. Yeah. And I always tell my actors when I work with them what an exceedingly privileged life it is if you get to teach someone how to feel in certain situations or allow them to feel in certain situations. We are in a country that wants us to drive, succeed. And sometimes what that means is that we don't sit in our own stuff. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so a film can do that for us. A film can provide that release. A film can provide that representation. A film can provide that alternate way of looking at something. And what a privilege it is to be able to be a part of a small cog in the wheel of those stories that get out there.
Before you go, I'd like to just acknowledge that and the way you think about that, because one of the things I ask clients when I'm coaching them or asking them a question is, what character best describes you in that movie, or what movie best describes where you're at in your life, because they can relate to those times and what they're going through, and how that character, the hero's journey and that arc, that story arc. So definitely just want to acknowledge that and the way you think about that, and to help people feel or see themselves in a situation. Because a lot of us, I wouldn't even say a lot of us, all of us we're all going through the same thing, just in different stages of life.
Yeah. Well, I always say we are the stars of the movies of our own lives, so we should step in. Right? It's like, you don't want to be that your movie was that you didn't step into the things that you were passionate about. No. So step in.
Sorry for cutting you off.
No, I love it too, because, I remember being in the NFL one time, and we had a speaker, and they said, who watches romance movies? And Wesley Woodyard was the only guy that raised his hand. He turned around and said, "Oh, y'all lying in here, huh?" Anybody was just like, no one was going to admit in the NFL locker room that, we watched this movie either with or without somebody we cared about. And so, to your point of making things that teach people how to feel, sometimes we're in environments where we don't know that we're going through it at a different stage than other people. And I think of lately, the movie that did that for me was
American Fiction.
American Fiction. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
I got to watch it.
Oh, my God.
It's fantastic.
There's a scene in this movie.
It's sneaky.
Yeah. Okay. Give it about 40 minutes, and then you'll see it. But in the scene, this guy has a brother who's going through his process with drugs, and there's a wedding at the house. He gets in, sees his brother, and he's like, "Get out of here. You're going to ruin the whole thing." The woman getting married comes in and goes, "Please stay. It's so good to see you." And that scene to me was nuts, because we've all been that person, you're going to embarrass everybody. Get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
But we all want to be that person that's like, "Hey, I love you.
Yeah.
Great to see you. How are you doing?" And that moment teaches people what they can do in situations.
Yeah. And I think for me, I have just in the last year or so come to the realization that I'm neurodivergent. And that's dumb for me to say that, because truthfully, I've known forever, but I don't think I allowed myself to say it.
What that mean? What is it?
Neurodivergent, ADHD, autistic. I say I'm neurocomplex. I got a little autism and I got a little ADHD.
All right.
And everyone in my family does, by the way. That is that's why I'm sort of oh, why should that be new? Maybe it was because that was my world. That was normal. And so it wasn't until I started seeing stories about it that I was like, wait a second. That's how I process life. Mm-hmm. That's so weird. And it has changed everything for me in terms of how I take care of my brain, how I move through life, how I plan a job that's coming up, because it changes as you get older, these neurocomplexities. And I would say that was taught to me completely through seeing a few things and going, wait a second, I feel aligned with that, weirdly. What's going on there? We learn so much about ourselves. That's why when people say, "Oh, it's just stories. It's just this. It's just story." I'm like, they changed. Sorry, they're the starting point of changing the world.
We just had another guest on a few weeks back, Craig Wortman, and he built the Sales Institute at Northwestern and Google Sales School. But his whole thing around sales is stories. He's like, that's what gets people to move.
Well, there's actual research. I mean, there's research about it. They put people into an MRI machine and they had them just read data or just read something. And I think two parts of the brain lit up. When somebody told story, and when that story contained things like descriptions of smells or light or whatever, so it went just a little bit deeper, 10 areas of our brains light up.
Wow.
So how do you get people to move? You light up their brains. Yeah. So it's not through data. Data always can't be heard usually until you catch them in on the emotion.
Top 5 movies that are just well done that you just appreciate in terms of the way the story is told.
You can start with Django Unchained, the greatest movie ever made.
Django Unchained. Green Book is one of my favorites.
That is definitely a male lens right there.
Well, yeah. Hey, yeah. It's a documentary.
As strange as it might sound to some, I don't know. I loved in the recent years, because I'm not going to remember. Well, actually, Breakfast Club is one of the best movies ever made.
Haven't seen it.
Fight me.
I haven't seen it.
Fight me.
Seen it either.
We'll watch it. It's on the watch list. It's on the Gridiron and Growth watch list.
Fantastic. And it holds up. I mean, it was done in the 80s. It was John Hughes, one of the most influential films
done in the 80s.
Yeah. So there you go. It's perfect. Yeah. Most recently, Top Gun Maverick is a top of mine. I saw it 3 times in the theater. I think it was one of the most...
I've never seen Top Gun.
What?
I know. We had Top Gun offense with Peyton, and I'd never seen it.
We literally have an entire offensive scheme called Top Gun when we did it. He had no
I'm
idea.
so sad because Top Gun Maverick in particular, with coming out of the pandemic, was such this joyful experience to go see it in a theater. And it is so beautiful. And the way they shot that, forget Top Gun. I mean, Top Gun was a great movie like this. But Top Gun Maverick, the way that was shot, there were times where, I think the first time I was in the theater, I was like,
Yeah.
Like, it was just like there's this one shot, and I went back a second time because I was like, I have to see this one shot.
What was it?
It's at the end. It's in the big last fight. So I don't want to say
Yeah.
Sorry.
So that one, I loved. If you're not a Hunger Games fan, you might not get
Watching
it.
with
But
my daughter right now.
Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes. It was absolutely a stunningly beautiful film, and it didn't get enough. It didn't get enough of anything, to be honest. A lot of what they brought out this last year for the Oscars, I didn't watch a lot of it. I've gotten to a point where our world is in a lot of strife right now, and so I don't want to view things that puts me in that space. I feel like I process that a lot, so I'm definitely in the escapist season of my viewing. So
I'm there with you. I like
everybody.
I like true stories that are done, in the
Well, what's
60s.
your favorite?
Green Book is one of my
I love Green Book.
favorite movies. It just tells a really good story.
And Viggo Mortensen, right? He's solid.
Yeah. I would say a film that was done really well, super tragic story, is Spotlight.
Oh,
About the Catholic Church. And
I don't know this.
Yeah, and it's incredibly. The film is just really well done.
Yeah.
A Few Good Men. It's not a true story, but it's one of my favorite movies.
A Few Good Men. One of the best scenes of all time.
Yeah.
I teach that scene. Yeah, when I teach acting.
Really?
What do you teach about? And I'm assuming the scene is in the courtroom, right?
Yeah.
Lay out the scene, and what do you teach about it?
Well, we talk a lot when I'm in that space. I'm usually talking about breathing and how breathing brings us into, and as athletes, you've got to know this too. It's like if you calm your breathing, it's like where your breathing goes, your body goes, right?
Control your
I
breathing.
sucked at it a lot early on.
I had to learn it. I had to relearn it my 9th year. I had to relearn how to breathe when you're out of breath. Yeah.
It's the same for actors. If you've got a really intense scene coming up where you've got to do it, because remember, actors are doing these scenes over and over and over again, and we get coverage. So whereas in this room, you guys have a camera on each of us, not every production has that. They're starting to do that more and more just because
Smaller, GoPros are
totally
cheaper.
everything's cheaper, and you wear your cast out. But sometimes we're talking about like doing an intense breathing of like 30 times in a row. And so, you really have to learn how to harness that breath. And, if you're like, gosh, I'm 29, I'm not really feeling scared anymore of the fake dragon that they've put in front of me.
Yeah.
That's about technique and breathing. That's how you're going to step into that space, is through your breath.
Wow.
And through your eyes. Blinking can mean something. Turning your eyes down from somebody can mean something. When that screen is really close up, everything that happens, it means something, and you can make something better or shift the mood or whatever by very small little things. So when I'm looking at scenes like that one, I'm looking at Jack Nicholson's breathing, how it's you can tell he's starting to get more and more agitated through that deep, you can't really say it, but you can tell in his chest, like he's like, that deep breathing starts to happen. That set in the jaw, he stops blinking because he's going to win this. Even though he doesn't, but he thinks he is in that moment. So all of that, and when you really looked at that, some of those actors, these are purposeful. They didn't accidentally step onto the field and just, get it right.
They didn't find a cat in the alley and bring it on set, Marlon Brando. Yeah.
These are purposeful things that they've worked on and that they're showing up with. And you guys have to know this, because I think it happens with sports. When people perceive that what you do is fun, they don't always perceive the level of work and technique that went into getting there.
1000% agree.
Yep.
And so that's how it is with acting too. It's like, that will be my soapbox forever. Stop asking artists to do things for exposure. They don't need exposure. They need to eat.
Right. Is that why some actors sometimes actually get frustrated with, hey, do that? When people ask them, like, hey, do that impersonation or act like that or say this,
go be funny.
Yeah, I feel like Will Ferrell's got to get that all the time.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, well, what are the components? Like, I have so much supporting me, just like you guys on the field have so much supporting you by the time you step out to go play that game. You've got a team behind you. You've got a uniform. You've got a time clock. You've got professionals there to make sure you're safe.
Mouth guard.
Totally.
Not
we
for me.
have this, when we step on on set. We have costumes, we have sets, we have practitioners who have made that space safe for us. We have everything set up, like everything, all of that goes into, into your preparation to show up and do the thing you do. And then on top of it, you've had private lessons, you've had classes, you've had time with the director, you've had, all of these things. And so I think there's a perception that, you can just show up and be like, catch the ball right now, go. And it's like, wait a second. Although y'all probably could catch the ball right now. But
what's the snap count? What's the snap count? Yeah.
But and it's exhausting. It just makes you feel like, I'm not here to just jump when you say jump.
Right.
It's like I'm a person. And that's the other thing I think that's hard is when you're in any area of fame is this space where people think they know you and that they can request things of you and they forget you're just a person.
Mm-hmm. If I saw Jeremy Piven right now, I'd ask him to negotiate a contract based off of what he did in Entourage,
He's a delightful person, and he probably could not. I don't know if he would be the best person to negotiate that contract.
You sound like he did.
Oh, man, he did an incredible job.
Yeah.
It would be a crime if we didn't get your expertise in this area. You mentioned storytelling before. What are key elements to storytelling to Krista Gano?
So when I work at Series Fest, which is where I met you first, I helm the pitch-a-thon. So I help artists get their ideas down to a 5-minute pitch. And I think when I work with them on that, which is really concentrated storytelling with a sales pitch attached, I would say remember your audience, show up relaxed, focused, and joyful to every page and everything you do. I mean, really allow yourself to be surprised at what may come up and what might happen. So be present to that in your storytelling. And let your characters speak. Like, don't try to sort of, move them into a place like where you think things should be appropriate. Because remember, stories, at least narrative stories, are about people. My writing partner always says this, and I always remember it when I want to try to make things nice, that we watch stories about incredibly flawed human beings making horrible choices and then getting out of it. Mm-hmm. So we have to let them fail. Mm-hmm. As we have to let ourselves fail. We have to let humanity rise first in all of our stories. And if all you're telling is a glossy story where everybody wins, then
we know it's not true.
Then why are we do we watch it? And likewise, I don't watch shows, and I won't say which ones they are in case anybody wants to check me on it. I don't watch, because someday I want to use one of those actors. I don't like to watch shows where everybody is unredeemable either.
Right. I think that's
Actually, I'll say one of them, House of Cards. I could not get through it. There was nothing good.
Yeah. It just got too dark.
Yeah.
It did get too dark. I stopped after a couple.
You're like,
But it was like, I was on.
Yeah. And I think I got to season 2, and I was sort of like, I just don't want to go spend time. Like, I don't want to spend time with it. If watching something is my play box, is like my playground, I would like the characters I spend time with there to be fun. Yeah. And I would also say if you're creating or you're writing a story, and these are really like narrative stories as opposed to business storytelling, remember that there is an audience for everything. There really is. So tell the story that you're felt led to tell, because that's what's on your heart and what's really important. I think that our energy always goes to things that we're meant to be doing. If something is sitting on my to-do list for literally 3 months, chances are my heart's not into it because I have pushed it off for 3 months for the things that my heart is into.
Right.
We don't know what you're talking about.
Take it as a sign.
It's one of those things when somebody says it, you're like, oh yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah,
100%.
So take it as a sign that maybe that wasn't that maybe there's a boundary that you could set there to shove that off your plate.
I'd love to know, and I think the audience would love to know, just about your creative writing process. Like, what does it take to get into that type of zone? When do you know, hey, I need to step away? And then when do you like, all right, I have a great idea. Now, what does it look like to time block and really flesh that idea out?
I am a little bit different in that I work with 2 writing partners, which for me really helps. And I think on many different levels. And putting in what I now know as ADHD tendencies. So I have always been that person who I'm going to let things percolate until there's a deadline. And then I will probably be a crazy person right up into that deadline, but I will meet it. Now, that used to be a trait that I was like, That's a horrible trait. That's a horrible trait of mine. I'm a
Part of your
procrastinator.
process.
I'm blah, blah, blah. But you're right. I've really come to an understanding that is part of the dopamine hit for an ADHDer, is that deadline makes things exciting for us, so we get it done. But now what I've done is we are pretty relaxed with the process until, we will do a lot of the fun stuff, like map out characters. I always believe that if you have a really good handle on who your characters are, then it makes writing easy because they just talk to each other. Like if I already know that a character, that this is what this character lives in, this is what they struggle with, this is what their goals are, this is what they're up to, by the time they talk to this other character who I also know that about, I just let them talk. And then you always go in and refine it, right? Get it out. Sort of like when you're a parent and you say out is better than in to your kids. Just get it out. Just write the draft. Just get it out. Know if you're writing that you will be 30 drafts in before anything gets made. And if you are uncomfortable with changing your stuff, this is not the profession for you. It's really about get it out, refine, get it out, refine, find something new. This film I'm directing in the fall, which I can't say much about, but I will say this. There was a time when one of our writers, because I was developing that one, I didn't write that one, she was pregnant in real life, and she called and she said she had lost her dad. And she said, having this baby without my father is like, I just didn't expect this is how my life would be, and I need to write through it. Can I take it to the script? And I was like, yeah, because we already have the script. So if it doesn't make it better, then we make that decision. But why not play?
Cultivate,
and see what happens. And our script is a million times better with a character being pregnant now and going through, and what Raleigh was able to bring up in that writing because she allowed herself to write through it. And so use everything. Don't stop yourself from writing. As far as time blocking goes, I know I write better in the mornings or late at night. I don't know why this one, but never in the middle. I know that I am a hyper-focused person, so I will go down a rabbit hole and write for 3 or 4 hours, and it will feel like 2 seconds. Wow. So I have to block that time, and I have to, penalty of death. You are not allowed. Yesterday, my husband came in, and he, literally put his hand on my back, and I was like, no, go away, right now.
I'm in the zone. Yeah.
And so, I do know that about myself, that once I'm in hyper-focus, I really need to let myself languish there and get to a certain point. I have kids, and I work from home, so staying in hyper-focus is not reasonable past probably a couple of hours before I have to figure things out, so I do have to find those time blocks. But I also trust. I think a lot about creativity is trusting that your brain's working on the problems when you're not doing it. Mm-hmm. So it's like I walk away and go I'm writing a script right now. I was like, gosh, there's these 2 sisters, and there's something that's not, we're missing something. We're missing a conflict. And I just walked away from it and was like, brain, go work it out. And it was in the shower at one point that I was like, there's the answer.
Wow.
Gotcha.
Okay. So sometimes you have to unhook. Which I don't think professional athletes get to do as much, but
we like to unhook. It just looks very different, right? Yeah. You do have to unhook the lock. A couple more questions though. One of the things I loved about getting to know you is you are what I call an elite person because you have all this experience, knowledge, success, and yet when we met for the first time, none of that came out. None of that came out in I'm looking down on you. You have formed what few people in my experience have done, which is I've got this great ability and talent, but I'm going to meet you where you're at and just see where this goes. How did you develop that?
I think a lot of that is my improv background, partially. I think the other thing, too, is I think athletes and actors should just hang out all the time. Because it's the same as that we all come from all over. Most actors really started from humble positioning. And I think athletes are the same way. It's like you get there because you worked hard, you stuck it out, you kept with it, you didn't go home when the others went home. A lot of us aren't brought, we don't come up with this idea of looking down on people. I think when that happens, there's a lot of fear involved in that.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've just really chosen that fear is not the place where I'm going to live. I'm going to live in a space of love, creativity. I believe every single person is creative, resourceful, and whole. And they're just choices, right? Like, we're going to get to know each other and we're going to collaborate or we're not. And then I'm going to wish you blessings on your way, and it's all good. Thank you for saying that. It's a choice to live in a very tough business with joy. Because if I didn't, it's a tough business. I mean, it's a business where we are working, on average, every film takes 7 to 10 years to come to fruition.
Wow.
So it is.
Wow.
We have to find our people, we have to find our joy, and we have to work hard.
Why are we always seeing actors eat in movies? Like, any scene, they're eating. What is the function of that?
Probably to make them look like they're all doing something normal that's not on their phones.
That's what it'd be in real life today? Yes. No. Yeah.
But it's terrible because I can't really eat that much. In fact, there's the really famous story from The Wolf on Wall Street. Is that that movie? There's that famous story where they got Leonardo DiCaprio to take a bite of sushi, I think, at one point. And it was on camera and it was a take they liked. So now it was stuck. So now continuity, he had to eat that bite of sushi 50 plus times. And he ended up throwing up several times and having like the whole thing. So we don't like the food. The actors don't like the food things. Now there's a lot of food in a film that
Right. But I mean, I feel like every scene an actor is either eating or doing something.
I think it's activity is grounding for any actor. You know, any sort of activity that you can do, whether it's, you know, we can't check our phones on camera because it's really boring. No one wants to watch everybody on their phones. But like whether it's, you know, checking your belt or fidgeting or moving away, like that type of stuff is grounding, moving energy. Y'all know it. Moving energy actually grounds you. So anxiety lives in inaction. So we need to be in action in order to lessen our anxiety. And it's the same for when you're doing something. We have to be doing life. It's called doing the doing. We have to be doing the things that we do in life, and that's what they do on camera. But it's not loved.
Well, I'm glad I asked.
By them.
Yeah. Well, Krista Gano, what an honor to have you. And truly, thank you for your time. And thank you for everything you've done for the people that are not in this room and for the thousands of careers you've affected in a positive, joyful way.
Yes, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Gridiron and Growth. Make sure to shoot us an email at gridirongrowthpod@gmail.com for some questions and sign up for the newsletter that can be found in the show notes. Big special thanks to Big Up Studios and Streamline Media for helping support Gridiron and Growth.